Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Liam Dann, New Zealand Herald Business Editor at Large. This is a podcast where we talk to New Zealanders about money and how it has shaped their lives. We're not going to tell you how to get rich. We're not going to pick the next interest rate move. But we are going to get you thinking about your relationship with money and what it really means to you. With me today, I have Te Pou, well known to followers of politics for his commentary across numerous media organisations, including the New Zealand Herald and News Talk ZB. In his day job, he's a tech company executive, managing human resources for cloud software company Mega. Kia ora, Shane. Welcome to the show.
It's really good to be here.
Now, I'd like to start these talks by asking guests if they, how far their memory goes back, I guess. What's your first memory of money in your life, and maybe even, cash, holding cash?
It's a very early memory because we didn't have a lot of money in our house. My father was a mill worker who actually earned really good money, looking back at it. And our mum was until she was 69, worked at the same basically fish and chip shop. We didn't have a lot of money, basically because my old man was a gambler and a drinker, but a hard worker at that. And we survived on mum's money and the family benefit. Yeah, and when you got 7 kids, and I think it was $3 a week, it all adds up. Yeah.
So did you have pocket money growing up?
Yep, we used to get $1 on a Friday night to go to the local disco at the hall, and we weren't allowed to go to the disco until we were about 12, and that $1 got us a fizzy drink and an entry to the disco. Yep, and if we could, we'd save a little bit of money the next day to go to the movies. So $1 went a long way.
Yeah, it was good money in those days, right?
Money, yeah.
But I mean, that's a little bit like you're saying about your father's income. In those days, that kind of work was paid quite well.
Yeah. We when he passed away a few years ago. We did about a calculation. He'd probably be on 100+ K, as a mill worker. But he had to work long hours for that and shift work, and it took a real toll on him, both physically and emotionally. And having seven kids was a heck of a burden. But you know what? We didn't go without food.
Yeah.
Our old man and mum put a lot of emphasis on education. They didn't have my mum probably didn't finish high school, let alone go to university. And I think, at last count, we've got like 7 or 8 degrees, postgraduate diplomas and doctorates in our little whānau.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. So you grew up in Kaurau.
Yeah.
It's like, and it went through some hard times with the forestry industry, right? So it's not famously, a wealthy place. Well,
see, I'm 54 and I moved out there at 85. So that was the introduction of Rogernomics. Now, quite the opposite, actually, Liam. Kaurau was a rich town, full employment, really good money. Rumour had it that the local pub had the biggest turnover in the whole of the country. No, it was a very wealthy town, a very egalitarian. We lived in not a state home, but a company home. But next to us was we loved this whānau to a day, was a Pākehā whānau that, and their dad was in charge of the local power station. So it was actually quite egalitarian times.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a lovely upbringing, actually. I'm very fond of those memories. Yeah.
So do you? I mean, do you feel? And I know this would go through some of your politics and things, but watching what happened after '84 with the Roger Douglas and those opening of the just the way that they liberalised everything. Did that affect the town quickly?
Yeah, it did, and I feel quite sad and upset about it. I'm a general supporter of the reforms, because I remember how tough it was to do business. But you know what? I had kids that were in the same class as me, that were just like me, good kids that have had really tough lives. And I've got an old mate of mine that I love dearly, and his grandson is third generation mongrel mob, and we created that. We created that as a society where we said, okay, those that are able to get on with life can get on with life, and those that fall by the wayside, so be it. Yeah, I feel quite upset about thinking about it, because they were good kids, just like they were like us.
I mean, a lot of thought goes into this, and I guess it's a fine line. But when you're growing up and the environment's similar, say in the 70s and things, is there a factor that makes the difference when it's one path is that gang life, and another path is your horizons change and you can get out into the world?
I think so. We personally had a bit more discipline, and it wasn't discipline with the vacuum cleaner stick, although I did get it a couple of times. It was just we were told that we had to be in the house by a certain time that we, where others didn't. You only didn't go to school if you were sick. We played organised sport because that's what we did, and it was a cheap form of entertainment for us. And to be honest, also I had mum and dad, and I had older brothers and sisters that were like 9 years older than me. That sort of like, so you had sort of two sets of brothers, mothers and fathers, if you understand what I mean. Yep. And also had cousins and whānau living in the town, so we looked after each other. So I think that was a point of difference, that we had some social infrastructure.
Yeah. I mean, you wrote a really nice column before Christmas, actually, about your mother.
Yes, my
and
mum.
you say there that she was not rich in financial terms, but she actually lived a very rich life. So, can you explain a bit about that? And
well, first of all, our mum worked until she was 69. She held 2 jobs, I think 3 sort of jobs, part of the gig economy. And she would just basically work and make sure that even when we were adults, if one of our sisters or brothers or one of the mokopuna were struggling, she would make sure that she would look after them as much as she as well as she could. Our mum wasn't someone who attended every single marae meeting, went to every single tangihana, but her job, as she saw it, was to make sure that the puti or the koha was given, and she just went absolutely without. Even in her later life, when she could have lived a bit more comfortable life, that just wasn't her style. If I gave her a mobile telephone and one of the mokopuna didn't have a phone, she'd give it. That was just her. And I can remember times where probably seen as a bit of soft touch, to be honest, Liam, where she would basically give her whole wage to another whānau because they were in greater need.
Wow, it's an incredible level of generosity, especially if you're not talking about people with a lot to start with.
No, and but the measurement, my mum's measurement was, if I've got enough kai for me and my mokos, we're doing okay, and we can just look after others. And that was our mother to the day literally she died.
Yeah. I mean, do you think there's a cultural aspect to how money is viewed in the Maori community, or is that too much of a stereotype?
No, I think it's a cultural aspect, but also my whakapapa is very important to me. But we were working class, and working class families looked after each other. If you didn't have any milk, and you would give your neighbours milk. If times were tough, you'd have them over for feed, even though you'd have 8-9 people at a table. So I think it was whakapapa based, but also our deep working class roots. And my old man was a unionist. He was Pākehā. He's a unionist, and just had a very soft side to him that ensured that although he sort of used to drink a lot and spend it up at the TAB, he also was a very generous person, probably to a fault. And I've inherited a bit of that, but that's cool.
But I guess it can make things more complicated in New Zealand when you're looking at poverty and wealth and things, and people put a Maori lens on it. But actually, it often is a class lens, because there's that working class thing through. If you look at, I grew up in Christchurch, and it's very much a Pākehā working class community there. Then there probably is some crossover. And
I think it's a different. I think whilst we were probably classified as poor, it wasn't a poverty of family connection and love, and it wasn't. We had the basics, and that was enough for us. But certainly, it isn't the level. It isn't the type of poverty that I've seen. Post 1980 onwards, that is real and is generational and is growing.
I mean, a weird thing I saw recently was Kawerau has got its property prices doubling, and I thought, I might ask you what you thought of that. I mean, that can't be good for a lot of people there.
Can't be good for a lot of people, but very hard to tell existing people that we need to do something about lowering their asset by 20-30%, because a lot of these people, I have whānau that still, and mates that still live in Kawerau. They're the last on the sort of the train going up in terms of property prices. But it makes sense. And so what's ostensibly happened, if you had people from Auckland who's selling their $1 million home, which sounds like a lot, but it's not actually. It's almost entry level in many parts of Auckland. They're selling up and they're going to live on or near the water in Tauranga, and they're $600,000, $700,000, and pocketing $300K, and then people from Tauranga are going to live in places like Kawerau and Whakatane. That's a small, manageable community, close to Rotorua, the lakes, and got good social infrastructures, good local doctor, not too far away from the hospital. Makes sense in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, it's logical, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and it's difficult for the Labour Party in particular, because often, if you look at the tradies and the people who've got building in their background, that's a path to wealth, or has been a path to wealth, to do up a house and sell it on.
But also, the negative is that if you're trying to get into the housing market and you come from a place called Kawerau, it's very tough, and particularly if you're minimum wage or you're unemployed. But here, there is positives to this, Liam. First of all, most people that now live in Kawerau either own it or their tenants. There's no empty homes there, and there were ghost homes. Not ghost homes because investors were sitting on it. People didn't want to live it. What would happen is that people would buy a house for a couple of $100, and that wasn't too long ago, and they would just take the house and forfeit the land to the local council and move the house to the beach or something like that. So what's happening is that shops are starting to open. Many people are seeing it as a good lifestyle choice. I've got 4 siblings that have moved back home now, that are participating in the local economy, got very good jobs, coaching the local football team, very active in our marae and iwi development. So there are some upsides to it. It's not
it does
all
create
downsides.
opportunity.
It creates opportunity and a talent gathering when people are going back home.
Yeah.
It's really positive in many ways.
Sure. Hey, look, I'll just jump back to your story a little bit and maybe ask you, about your first jobs and the first time that you ever had a bit of money. What were the first things that you did for employment?
Well, I moved to Auckland in 1985, and I was I was doing multi-trade training. I wanted to become a chef. I don't know why, because I'm terrible. I've got terrible hand-eye coordination, and I'm not an artist. But
you like eating?
Yeah. And I like food, and I like the sort of the thought of being working with people. And I moved up to in 85 to Auckland, and I think we got like $17 a week plus our rent paid, and most of it, to be honest, was probably spent at the local pub, even though we were underage. But it was the type of thing where I was able to learn and work. And and to be honest, comparatively, I've always earned fairly decent money, even though as a chef or whatever, because in those days you get time and a half on a Saturday, double time on a Sunday. And then I got into my union work, and the union boss said, "Hey, you're not quite ready to come and work for us full time, but we're going to move you to the hospitals." And I was on $8.75 an hour. I remember it as if it was yesterday, but time and a half and double time, and then time and a quarter on after 8 p.m. And so I always earned reasonably decent dough.
Yeah. And were the things you saved up for and splashed out on?
Music, vinyl. Oh, geez, I wish I had that vinyl.
Be worth something
now. Jackets, leather jackets, concerts. Spent a lot of money on booze. A lot of money, and just having a good time, as a lot of young people did. And so I'm not a great saver, never been a great saver until reasonably recently, and we'll talk about that later, I would say.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, that is pretty, often you're never better dressed than when you're in your 20s and you've got your first paycheck. But, so those sort of ideas of, saving for retirement and all those classic personal finance things, they're just something that maybe you've started to think about a bit later on?
No, a bit later on, because, what you'd do is you'd go... You'd spend up large on payday, and you got money in your hand too in those days. So very easy to spend. So you would have to go and physically go to the bank and put some in, and it's very easy to give that away. And even if I did overtime at the pub, I worked at the Glue Pot Hotel. What a great story I could tell about that. And, even if you worked overtime, you just spend what you earned. To be honest, and payday was on Thursday. By Wednesday things would be a bit tough, and you'd go to the local cafe, or you wouldn't call it a cafe these days. You call it a lunch bar, and organise a bit of tick until pay came through. It's just the way we operated.
That'd have been the great days of the Glue Pot, wouldn't it?
Great days of the Glue Pot Hotel.
Coming through there.
Yeah, just what you always did is you always pay your rent. Yeah, and then you paid what was on tick. So you might have a booze bill at the local bottle store, or because you knew that you couldn't go back again. So you had to pay for those fundamentals. And the other thing I would do is I would make sure that if there was a tangi on or something in the marae, that I would send some money to mum because that's just the way that we were taught.
Yeah, and how about nowadays? If you've got if you wanted to treat yourself now, is it similar sort of things, or do you have hobbies and passions?
I do have hobbies. Well, I have passions, and that's my kids. And I was a late starter with my children, 39. No, we have disposable income. My comparative life, where I am at 54 to where my mum and dad at the same age, and we're at is just totally different. To be honest, we live in a very different world. To be honest.
Yep. But does that sort of change your attitude to money generally?
It has changed but it's been changed. I do spend. My wife is generous, but she's more controlled about money, and she just since the first day we got together, she said, "Save your money on the little stuff, and then you can buy the big stuff down the track." And it probably helps that she's a chartered accountant and just a much more disciplined. And we wouldn't have what we've had if I was in charge of the dough, to be honest.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good partnership.
Yeah. It is a partnership. Yep.
Yeah. So when like you're well known for the political views. When did you start to feel that political thing hitting you?
As early as I can remember. My first memory is when Norman Kirk died in 1974, because it really upset my father. He cried. We were up late, and we were able to stay up late because big time wrestling was on, and it got interrupted. And Norm Kirk died, and I can remember my father was like a brother had died. It came as a shock to us all. And we talked politics at the table. My father talked politics in the smoker room. It was just who we were and what we did. And he was a union guy. He would tell us, come election time, he would say, I'm not telling you who we voted for. Well, we know he was a Labour man because he went to he didn't go to the Labour meetings, but he always contributed. Yeah.
And so, and as you got involved in the workforce, and then there was the opportunity through the unions to develop your career that way.
Yeah, that's right. I was working as a chef, and then they used to call me the charcoal chef because I burned everything. And then I went and worked the bars at the Glue Pot, and got very active from there. As a union delegate, I was, I think, 20, and I was the president of the Northern Hotel and Hospital Workers Union. I remember the guy that I challenged was about 55, much older, and and so I just sort of become an activist, and it's just grassroots, from a bottle store bar guy to a union organiser, and then to a secretary.
Yeah. I mean, and it's probably something to do with the age you are, and the way that politics has gone in this country. But that sort of view of left-wing politics, left-wing politics generally, has sort of shifted and got how to describe it? It's got more complex in its worldview. Would you consider yourself old school on the left-wing stuff?
Yeah, I would. It was really interesting. Even though we came from, as we said, Kawerau, we actually we had a world view, and the reason and I wondered why or how we did that. It was quite simple. We only had three sources of information, but you had to read and watch what you had to read and watch. One channel. So you got the 6 o'clock news, We all were home to watch the 6 o'clock news. The New Zealand Herald, my father would read it from beginning to end, and do the crossword, and then bring it home, and he would tell us to sit down and read the newspaper, the radio, ostensibly to listen to the Gigis, the horses, but we had one source of information, but it was a variety of information. You had to watch the news, then you watched Jacques Cousteau, and then you watched. You didn't have choice, which actually didn't limit us. I think in many respects it broadened our horizon. Because we had a variety. We had to watch the variety or turn it off.
Sure. So I'll ask this question, which is making it as simple as possible, and it is not necessarily an easy answer. But when you look at the world, is there, what's your view on why some people are poor and some people are rich?
Greed. I think international. I think far too many monopolies. I think that individuals and international companies greedy. And, the reality is that Amazon, the owner of Amazon,
Bezos, Yep.
the reality is that he's got wealthy because he has tens of thousands of workers that live in poverty, and I just don't know how he can sleep with himself. I don't know how he can sleep at night, and I really think, there's an old saying that goes way back, making profit on the backs of workers. That's literally how it happens, and I'm just very sad, and I get upset that we have a society, and it's happening in New Zealand. We have a number of people that live in absolute wealth, and then we have people that live in indentured generational poverty that we have over the last 20 years. 20 years ago, we never saw it. It's real here, and it's growing. It's growing. The inequity is growing.
Yeah, I mean, it is a systematic issue, I guess, and some people would say, oh, well, these billionaires it's a side effect of the fact that they've got this freedom built into capitalism, and that they're free to go and do this and do that. Where do you see that kind of argument around individual freedom? And it's the classic new right argument, right? That maybe it's the individual, and if people take the personal responsibility, they can lift themselves up and all that kind of stuff.
Look, I think there is some truth to that, but if you don't have equity of opportunity, then you're going to have an inequity of outcome. If you have a kid that is brought up, goes to school and is hungry and is cold and has poverty-related diseases like rheumatic fever, he or she is never going to get ahead. If you have a parent of real wealth, or even middle-class wealth, as my kids are, the chances is that they get a better start and they're going to do better in life. It doesn't always work out that way, but the numbers are against kids born in poverty.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge challenge, and New Zealanders talk about it all the time. We could assume, let's assume here that we've got good people in the government right now.
Yeah.
But are they going to solve it? And I guess the question then is, if you were in charge, if there was something you could do that you think would make a big difference, is there something you would enact?
Well, no. Look, I question that. I think there's a couple of real issues. If New Zealand, both on an individual basis and collectively, would have been a much better place if we had a decent superannuation program from when Norm Kirk first introduced it, and then Māori got rid of it. You have a look at Australia's individual wealth, working class, middle class wealth, the investment programs back into infrastructure. Of course, it's a lucky country in terms of minerals on the top in the middle of nowhere, but also underpinned by their superannuation program.
And we're pretty lucky here if we want to be. We've got grass and we're growing.
That's right.
Food and all those things.
But back to your central question, I think that if we had a better superannuation program that had longer and greater capacity, and I think that super should be compulsory for people that work, and that the contributions on both sides ought to be greater. And the other thing is that I believe that one of the things that Grant Robson talked about that I hope this government enacts is social insurance. So it would work similar to an ACC levy. It would be attached to your personal account, and that if you were unwell or if you had sort of employment issues, it would offer you a greater level of protection, but also another investment basis. But having said that, there are more fundamentals. This government ought to be brave, and I think that the political will is there to not only increase minimum wages but introduce living wage. Because I'm a big fan of that, because it has a circular effect. People on minimum wage or livable wage, they spend every single cent, and they spend it in the local community. So it goes around. Yeah. So, and people say, well, that doesn't help the international sort of investment. Well, yeah, it does actually, because it goes around and it feeds up and down. So I think it does have a benefit. And the other thing is that I think this government should be brave, and I think there is the political will to do it, and they've certainly got the political mandate, and that is we need to do something about increasing the basic and fundamental benefits.
Yeah. Yep. So I guess, are you optimistic that we can solve some of these things in New Zealand?
Well, I'm optimistic, but I live in a different. I live in a nice house, drive a nice car, got a good job. My kids go to good schools, so I live a privileged life. So I am optimistic, but I understand. I get the lens from where I look through, but I've got plenty of whānau, plenty of mates who aren't optimistic, who are in a hole and they don't see any future. And for many of them, whether it's Labour or National or the Greens, it's actually irrelevant because they've been poor when it's been National, they've been poor when it's Labour, and they don't see themselves as being anything but poor.
Yeah. So there's a mindset that's just very hard to shift. I mean, you've only got to, you're working in the CBD, walking up here, you've only got to walk around town at the moment to see that there's a whole really just layer of people just completely out of the, locked out of the economy and out of society.
Yeah. They are locked out of the economy. They are locked out of society, and they don't see any, and they don't participate. They don't vote, and they don't see it as worthwhile. They don't have the ability to do it because you've got to have an address. But also, I think it's more complicated than that. Most talking about homelessness, which you see every day when you get walked to and from work, is you know that there's a mental health issue there, there's big gaps in our social infrastructure. And I think that, for the last 30 years, we really haven't paid attention to the social infrastructure. And one of the positive about COVID, if I can say this, is that many people that lived comfortable lives all of a sudden were cast out of work and really, for the first time in their lives, got a feel for what it was like to be vulnerable. And I know plenty of families that today are well off, but only about 3 or 4 paychecks away from being poor, away from the mortgage, being called in.
If you've got a big mortgage in Auckland, you're not,
that's right.
It doesn't take long. It's interesting. And actually, another thing I've been talking to people about, and some economists and things, the way that, the politics of the economics is turned, because you have something like COVID and everybody looks to the government for a response. And it kind of makes people realise, oh, hang on, maybe the government has got a bit more of a role here than we had thought in New Zealand.
That's right. And it was very interesting because I love American politics. The Republicans weren't arguing about the stimulus program, the stimulus checks. They were just arguing about the amount of it. They weren't saying, no, this isn't the government's issue. They were saying, oh, no, we need to perhaps send it in a different direction. But none of them, none of those parties, and either in New Zealand or the rest of the world, no one that I can think of said, the answer lays in enhancement of capitalism. No one said that. It was about social infrastructure and looking after each other.
Yeah, that's great. I'll bring it back just to you to finish up if I can. And that is, I guess, thinking about personal finance, and I always, this bit where I say, well, this is not a financial advice show, and please don't take us literally on things. But so when it comes to the way you look at money now, are you sort of active with it, or are you kind of just doing the basic personal finance things right? And
active with it, but by proxy through the wife who is a chartered accountant. So, I don't mind sharing it. Diversification I think is important. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. I feel a bit bad talking about it because, we're taught up never to talk about money, but I think, it's important to share this stuff, but also to predicate it by that I'm in the position to do that personally, I think diversification is important. Housing, you're better off if you can possibly do it. I know it's much tougher now to own a house as soon as you can. It is tough, but, I first bought my first home in 88, 89, and I was paying 24%.
Yeah.
Every time I was walking to the letterbox, and in those days you got slow mail, your mortgage would go by $40 a day. So it's tough, but it was tough, but in a different sense today. Diversification is important, and taking some risk, but not too huge. So stock market, perhaps. Owning home ownership, and also, to be honest, I can really understand in this market, even though people might be opposed from a moral perspective in terms of contributing to homelessness, I can understand only too well people owning a second investment home as we do. I can understand that completely and totally.
I mean, it's clearly logical from a financial point of view, isn't it?
And easy, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, it's the money's almost free, eh?
Yeah.
You know,
that's right.
And you know, I suppose justified it on my own head. You know, the particular property is that we, the primary landlord, the secondary landlord is housed in New Zealand, and it houses a women's refuge home. You know, you know, makes me feel a little bit better. But I understand that there's a whole bunch of people in a totally different space in Aotearoa. I get that completely.
Yeah. So is the money? You know, would you describe money as a motivation for the way?
No. But I'd rather have some money than not. To be honest.
Yeah.
One of the dilemmas, and just being honest with the sort of listeners, one of the dilemmas I think I'm going to have in the near future is how do I not. Will my kids be okay, but how do I ensure that they're not privileged little brats and that they will take their own risks in life, that they will be independent? You know, and that was a challenge that I had when I was 17 or 18, but that was because I had no choice, you know? And when my kids do have a greater level of financial support than I would have, but it's a challenge as a dad, and you know, their mum and I have talked about it at length.
Because you want your kids to make some mistakes themselves to learn, but you don't want them to make too big a mistakes.
Yeah, and also you don't want them to be privileged little, you know. But we have a leveller. We do have a leveller, and that is that we're very involved in our marae. We're very involved in our whānau, and you know, some of our kids live a very different life to the kids we live, and that's important to us.
Just to stay engaged with the world around you.
Yeah.
Hey, look, that's brilliant, Shane. I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you. But look, thanks for talking and thanks for sharing your experiences.
Cheers.
And thank you for listening. If you've got feedback, drop me a line, liam.dan@nzherald.co.nz. And if you want to hear more of these, please subscribe at iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts.